One second. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming. Um, Please, at any point, we're a intimate little group here. So at any point, please interrupt, ask questions, clarifications, anything like that. Um, both of you are pretty familiar because we've been working together for a while, and you have your own backgrounds. So feel free to, lean in, ask difficult questions, um, etc. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen now. Okay, great. So this is the beginning of a series that I'm calling Dancing with Lions. I'm very excited about this. It's very meaningful to me. And, there's like 1,000 different ways that I could have imagined starting um, these classes. And none of them were wrong answers. But I wanted to start with something that was at least extremely important for me personally in the beginning of my journey into learning how to meditate and studying Eastern wisdom. And it was a really important meditation for me called the Lion's Dance. Well, go ahead and chat it in. Amy, have you done this meditation before? LJ, I don't think you have.
I'm
Okay,
not.
cool. Okay, cool. So, Amy, this is going to be hopefully pretty interesting to you, because we're going to be taking the standard look at the Lion's Dance, but we're also going to be seeing how we can pair that up with the Yoga Sutra and with the Kamala-Shila's Bhavana Krama, which is the stages of meditation. So for me, it's been extremely beautiful and clarifying. I've gotten a lot of rich depth out of not only just the meditation itself, but then in addition to that, triangulating that meditation with the other resources that I've really studied. Um, so, uh, but before we get into class, what I'd love to do is I want to state a little bit of my mission at Spiritual Warrior and why we're doing the things that we're doing. Spiritual Warrior, you two are my friends, so I'm gonna just talk very casually. Um, so I left YSI, and then I was like, I want to keep supporting YSI, but through a different way, because I love what we teach. For me, it's like finding a well in a desert. It's really extraordinary. Um, but then, we kind of went our different ways. Um, I'm still supporting YSI and working with YSI a lot, but there is less of a relationship directly between Spiritual Warrior and the Yoga Studies Institute. So then I said, what do I really want to do? Like, what really is Spiritual Warrior? And what I really want to do. And I'm asking for your help in this because we're together because we share a common vision, and I think we share inspiration. And so, I know I can't do this alone, but I'm really excited by this idea of spiritual warrior participating in a cultural movement of love. So why do we learn all this Dharma? Why do we do all this meditation? Why do we do all these things? At the end of the day, it's to undo a culture of destruction and replace it with a culture of love, a culture of regeneration. And so, as much as we talk about practices and all these things, at the end of the day, what I just really want to do is create an international community or national, whatever, just a community of spiritual warriors who are people who are fearless in giving love to the world and to participate in that cultural movement. Uh, we're not the only ones, obviously. Um, but uh, but yeah, so that's what I'd like to do. And so in the upcoming events of what will be happening in the foreseeable future, the near fu term future, you'll see blood donations. This is a practice that I've been doing for a long time. Is it studying the books? No. But I think that it's a really, really cool way of practicing the path of the Bodhisattva of, how can I give me to the world in a really intimate and profound way. And for me, one of the things is for me, it's a very easy thing to do to give blood, but it literally saves lives. So I think that's really cool. And I'm just imagining that, one day some nonprofit will be like, I don't know why, but we just get this huge wave every 8 weeks of these really cool meditators who are just filling the blood banks. Like that's a cool story that I want to see come out of the spiritual warrior community. So you don't have to do this. I'm encouraging you to consider it. And I think it'd be really cool to help hold each other accountable because although it's in one way, very simple to give blood, it's also very difficult to make it a priority as well as your normal practice. So a power of a community is to hold each other accountable and put something on a calendar and try to do it. So feel free to join the first week of June. Let's donate some blood. And if you donate blood, let me know. I think it'd be cool. June 2nd, I'm doing a fundraiser talk for Sarah May from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern with a little Q&A. On June 5th, by the way, that dynamic was really fun. This is how I want, this is how I envision a spiritual warrior to grow and develop, as we are just a baby community, is, I just worked hard on something and I'm really excited about it and I'm inspired to share it. So then I'm like, hey, do you guys want to hear it? And then you'll be like, yeah. And then we'll try to find a time and a date. So I'm going to be teaching a little bit about the inner body. What exactly I'll be teaching, I can't tell you because I'm going to respond in real time to the people who show up. Because the way that you teach the inner body is extremely specific to the people who show up. So what we will be teaching, I'm not sure exactly. We'll see who shows up. But I am available to teach, and I'll have all of my resources available to teach um, on June 5th, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And then
Awesome. I'm really excited for that one because this is the concept I really know nothing about. So I'm definitely
nice.
really looking forward to that one.
Cool. Yeah, nice. Um, Dancing with the Lions weekend workshop. So my intention is these Saturday classes, we're only going to be able to get so far in these. And so what I hope to do is once every quarter maybe is to do like a whole weekend where, it's 4 hours on a Saturday, 4 hours on a Sunday where we practice together and we really try it. So we'll talk, practice, discuss, take a break. Talk, practice, discuss, take a break, and really try to accomplish the goals of the Lions Dance. So the first one's going to be June 21st and 22nd. I don't know what time because I don't know who's going to come, and I'm available all day on those days. So if you're interested in this, raise your hand, let me know, and I'll put together. We'll figure out what's going to work for everybody. And then Fast for Hunger is just another little thing that our community does. Um, if you've been with me for a while, we've been doing this for, I think, close to 2 years now. Every new moon or the day after the new moon, actually, we fast and then we donate to feed our hungry neighbors. And then I do a compassion meditation on that day, so you can meditate instead of eat, for example. Okay, so that's what's coming up. Another quick little change is we had asana classes on Monday mornings, but I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. There wasn't a lot of uptake, and I didn't really promote it, and it became a little challenging with my baby. So, so I changed it, and I realized that there's a lot of people in the community who are not on this call, but have said, I just need the foundations of how to meditate. So I said, okay, let's just start from square zero on how to meditate. We'll do Monday mornings, 8 to 9 a.m. And then LJ's going out to Europe, so LJ that'll transfer over nicely. 8 a.m. will become afternoon for you. So, but
That'll be beautiful considering I waking up at 8 a.m. is has become not normal for me recently. So perfect.
yeah, it's a good, again, it's nice to have something on a calendar to be accountable to. Um, so yeah, how to meditate from square zero. Um, cool. Saturdays are for Sangha is this 8 to 9:30, and then we're gonna be recording all these and putting them online. And then the question marks are one of my visions for Warrior Circle is to respond to the needs and desires of the community, which are going to change and shift over time. So, for example, an example of that would be like the inner body teachings. Cool, let's do that. And so it's like we have these Monday things and these Saturday things and then recordings, but we can do more than that, depending on just being connected with you guys and feeling what your needs are. So request things so that I know. I'll do my best to anticipate and be proactive. Um, but the idea here is just to be really connected directly to what's the demand and then supply it very precisely. You know. Um, so cool. Okay. That was kind of housekeeping stuff. Questions, comments, concerns, requests.
No, but I love the idea of that like open dialogue format. That's like a really cool idea of like requests and like deep dives into different areas for sure. So definitely gonna keep my thinking cap on.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. And we'll see how it scales up. But I think it will. All right, so let's dance with some lines. Um, you know, Actually, before we get into this, I'd just like to dedicate this. Um, I don't know how long I'm going to be teaching this series, but I'm committing to teach it as long as needed. Typically when, someone in like just tradition, you commit to finish a thing once you start it. So I don't actually know what the finish is, because I'm not doing this for me. Um, I'm sharing what I feel like is one of the most transformative practices in my life. Um, and my commitment is to teach it as long as it is useful. So I commit to do that. So thanks for being here. And my intention is to give away the precious jewels that I've been given. So I wanted to start with a picture. Here's your homeboy. Oh, hey Sophie, welcome. So here's your homeboy back in, I think this was 2011. So this is young Bob when Bob first grew his beard. I have shaved my beard 3 times since this picture, which is kind of fun. And and I think that some of you know this story, some of you don't. But I want to start by talking about why I'm so passionate about this. Um, when I was a senior in high school, I made a deal with my administration. I was kind of over high school. I only needed like one more class or two more classes because I was trying to finish high school early. And so I made a deal. I said, "Hey, listen, I don't want to be stuck, in school. I want to go out into the world, and that'll give me a better education." So I did a series of really unconventional things, by making a really important sale to the school administration, convinced them to let me break all the rules. And so I ended up living on a farm in Costa Rica, doing what I was most passionate about, and still am extremely passionate about, which is regenerative agriculture. My chief definite aim in life, in total, I wrote this down for the first time around this age. My chief definite aim in life is to harmonize man with nature. And it's been a long journey to understand what I meant when I said nature, which is extraordinary. And I talked about it probably for the first time on a podcast. If you want to look it up, it's called the Toddcast with Native Yoga. I did that like about 6 months ago, and it was a really beautiful conversation. What does it mean to harmonize man with nature? So my first starting point was like literal ecosystem, natural world. And so I went to live on a farm that was doing an agricultural practice of using the ecosystem's biological thrust to create all the food and fiber we needed without, using ecosystem design rather than clear-cut monoculture. And so it was an extraordinary experience. And in that library, in that farm, was a book on Buddhism. And I had never studied Buddhism before. And it started teaching me the very basics of meditation. And so I looked up on the map exactly where my hut was because there was no building. There was no like on the farm, there was no like central place. It was the bathroom was where the bathroom made sense. The kitchen was where the kitchen made sense. The huts, that we slept in were in the ecosystem where it made sense. And so everything was just like where it made sense. It was really radical. And so I had this beautiful little hut, it was hardly any walls, so sleeping on bamboo. And it was right here. I found it. And so it dipped down and then came into another peak. And so my hut was here and there was a mountain top and I was kind of three-quarters of the way up the mountain. It dipped down, came back up to another mountain top. And the sun would rise in the east and it would slowly illuminate the whole valley. And so I was practicing what I was learning about meditation because I'd always been a student of the mind. I knew that my mind was extraordinarily powerful and I should take it seriously. And so I had this really extraordinary experience uh, that was beyond description, and it changed my life forever because it was the realest thing that I'd ever experienced. Like the mind was released, and I was able to, you know, just enter into a place that I had no idea that I could even enter into. And it was extraordinary, and it was beyond words. So then I spent the next 5 years trying to figure out what the heck happened to me. And coming from a science background, I got really into physics and quantum physics and all this kind of stuff and really did some hardcore research. And then I finally found, years and years and years later, a meditation called the Lion's Dance, which for the first time explained exactly what I experienced, how to get there, and then where to go and what to do in it. And so that's why this meditation is so special to me because I could not believe that someone could so clearly describe the subtle states of mind and what happens to consciousness once it's absorbed. Um, so that's my inspiration uh, is to share a little bit about, well, as much as I can about that. And that's a little bit of my origin story. So we're going to be studying three main texts. There's going to be a fourth one, but the three main texts are written by Kamla. So I want to talk about these great people who wrote these texts because I think it's really important to know where these come from um, and the story about them. Context is really important. So, if we're engaging in this journey, let's set a good foundation. So Master Kamalashila, incredible Indian sage. Kamalashila translates to the Lotus of Ethics, which is really beautiful. He's most famous for his text on the stages of meditation. So that is not the Lion's Dance. But this is going to be actually our main text because the Lion's Dance itself is just a couple verses of poetry. And so to be able to understand and access that, we need a really nice foundation. And so in Sanskrit, it's Bhavanakrama. And then in Tibetan, it's Gomrim. So Kamalashila is an Indian who, at the request of a king, the Tibetan king, traveled to Tibet, and he wrote this uh, to follow up winning a legendary debate against a school who had a wrong understanding of emptiness, who had a wrong understanding of the ultimate nature of reality. Like, what is the goal to meditate? And so it's such an instructive teaching, which is still relevant to today, where a lot of the meditations that you'll run into in the East and West is this idea of becoming thoughtless, like entering into a space where we have no thoughts. think of nothing, which is a very, very harmful idea, actually. The idea of emptying the mind of thoughts is habituating the mind on being thoughtless. Which, if you think about it, what we're really trying to do is be mindful, not mindless. And so there's a really unfortunate misunderstanding that dates all the way back to the 8th century and before of this idea of meditation is thinking of nothing. So he debated against that school and won the debate and wrote a text about it. And in that day and age, if you won the debate, the loser had to adopt your school and take you as their teacher. And so Kamalashila adopted this huge school of people who had a misunderstanding of meditating on emptiness. So he wrote this incredible text, and we're going to spend a lot of time going through that text. He also wrote the treatise, many great works on the Middle Way, which is Majjhimika, commentaries on the Dhammapada Sutra, which is an extremely difficult text, very, very cryptic, but extraordinarily profound. And then he has some great tantric texts also. So that's the first author that we're going to be learning from. All right. And all right. And these would become our friends that we're going to be hanging out with on Saturdays for quite some time. And then if you're practicing during the week, they're people that you'll hang out with during the week. Master Patanjali, Pata, comes into a lot of different words in English, but one of them is to fall. And then Anjali is like Anjali Mudra is when you put your hands in prayer, but it's also this like having your hands extended out as if you were to receive like ointment or water. Ointment comes from Anjali. So Master Patanjali translates into fell into hands of prayer, which I think is really beautiful. And a somewhat mythical being. It's very difficult to pin down the true biography of Master Patanjali. But we're not going to get too much into that in this moment. But he wrote the Yoga Sutra, and that's going to be another one of our main texts in the series of Dancing with Lions. And then Master Sangha, this is a super legendary Buddhist icon who organized and clarified much of the teachings of Buddhism and contributed to the canon. 350 AD is about, his time period, and he is the one who wrote the Lion's Dance. Too many accolades to mention now. If you want to do like a really cool deep dive into a biography, check out Master Asanga. Super interesting stories. He wrote the Abhisamaya Alankara, which is the ornament of realizations, and that's the main topic of that text is the perception of the true nature of reality. And then here's a really critical piece that you're going to see show up over and over and over and over and over again, is that it's not all the way to have a perception of the true nature of reality until we can do so under the influence of the desire to help all beings. And so that's a really, really, really absolutely critical fundamental idea is to really have that idea saturated into our being so that when we're doing it, that is that is the kind of underlying foundation of everything. And in the Abhisamaya Alankara, that is where we find the lion's dance. Um, and that was originally spoken by the historical Buddha 2,500 years ago in his 100,000 verses on the perfection of wisdom, but it was then clarified and expanded upon by Master Sangha in that text. And the Tibetan is Nyontok Gyen. Okay, probably a lot more information and this a little boring. Perhaps you're finding this to be a little bit boring, and but it's really good habit to understand a text and who wrote it and what they were because uh, in our tradition, you should check everything out. Don't take anything as it is said. You have to take everything into careful consideration, understanding what the context is, what the motivation of writing it is, etc. Because a good Buddhist has to challenge everything that they're told. So what they share in common all these three authors and these three texts specifically, what they share in common is it's an exploration into perfect meditation. So we just talked about a lot of different things. So what's all in common? And then why did I bring them together? It's because they have unique and different approaches. And I hope that you keep this in mind as we journey through these different concepts. So what's different about the Yoga Sutra and its approach to perfect meditation is that it describes the objects that the mind perceives as it drops from single-pointed concentration of crude things into increasingly subtle levels of awareness. And the other texts do that, but in a different way, to then finally land in the perception of the ultimate nature of reality, directly realizing the emptiness of what are called the three spheres. So that's a really beautiful contribution that we'll find explicitly in the Yoga Sutra. And the three spheres make up every single moment of experience. And so these meditation levels are called samadhis, and they're useful for knowing where we are in our plunge into the profound using the system of the school of yoga. So the way that it's described is in the system of yoga, capital Y yoga, which is different than lowercase y yoga. Okay, and then that plunge has extremely similar qualities and characteristics as the other schools' descriptions of it, but that's what's going to be super unique. And we'll see the differentiations between the different schools to help us to understand what it is that we're really trying to do, which makes us very precise in getting to the goal of meditation. So in the Lion's Dance, it's more detailed than the Yoga Sutra. So it's similar. It's a 9 level drop from obvious to ultimate with guidance on what needs to be left behind in order to progress, which is really, really, really helpful. And the Yoga Sutra is similar, but it has a different framework. And then how we use the highest levels of concentration to flip into the direct perception of emptiness, into the direct perception of ultimate nature. The Yoga Sutra does not say explicitly how to flip. So that's a huge contribution of the Lion's Dance. So we're seeing more details, a little more nuance, and then, how to actually flip into that ultimate experience. Whereas the Yoga Sutra doesn't explain that. So the Lion's Dance is called this, by the way, because when we do that, um, in the same way that the fearless king of all the beasts shakes as it makes its roar, that is the symbol of how we become when we grasp the truth of Dharma or the truth of the nature of things. All of the things that uh, create suffering and misunderstanding in our world shake off of our mane, and they're scared away by our roar. So that's why it's called the Lion's Dance. Super cool, super beautiful, and uh, at, yeah. Anyway, there's more to that, but we'll get into it. And then finally, what's different about the stages of meditation? It's a very logical, um, it's a very detail, it's extremely detailed on the logical basis upon which all this meditation is possible in the first place. So that's really, really, really cool. You don't see that in the other texts. And so Stages of Meditation is the most expanded text that we're going to be using, which is why we'll be following it the most. And then we'll use the landmarks and descriptions of the other texts to help create context to the Stages of Meditation by Kamalashila. And then it has way more in terms of the benefits of every single step along the way, which is really beautiful. So it provides a step-by-step series of meditations, which is why it's called a rim. In Tibetan, rim means stages or steps or paths or levels. It indicates a sequence. So it's called Gom Rim. Gom means meditation in Tibetan. Rim means stages or steps. You'll hear that in the Lam Rim, which is a very, very popular thing in Tibetan culture and Buddhism. And so it gives us a series of meditations and realizations that we should practice and acquire on our way up the stages. So this is really, really, really functional. And this is where we're going to be spending a lot of our time. Because it's like, okay, great. I understand that state, but how do I get there? Okay. The stages of meditation tells you. And that's what we're going to be digging into a lot in this course. And then there's the other thing that's really unique about the stages of meditation is that it has a very detailed description of the techniques, the problems, and the antidotes of the problems as we progress through the levels. If you've ever tried to meditate, you've run into challenges. So the other texts don't tell you how to overcome those challenges. The stages of meditation does tell you how to overcome those challenges. So it's very easy to track where you are in your progress based on the problems, not even by the state that you achieve, but by the problems that you're facing. And then it tells you how to solve those problems. And it is wild. When I first heard that, I was like, there's no way that someone could be that, like, there's no way it's that universal because, like, everybody's so unique. I will tell you what, it is wildly universal. Um, Cool. And then this text presents the essence of the Mahayana Buddhism, which is my background for how I approach this. We can take a lot of different approaches into Buddhism, or sorry, into meditation, and it will really decide how you think about it and what you do. So the context that I've entered into this and that I'll be sharing is specifically around Mahayana Buddhism. We will compare and contrast how it's different from different schools and different approaches, because every path has validity in it to some degree. But that's going to be the context. And so I love the stages of meditation because it kind of sings the song of my heart. Cool. How this series will be structured, we're going to work through each text's main ideas and presentations, and then we'll start with the teachings that are required to begin the sequence of meditations described in the stages of meditation. Because you don't want to just like jump in without context. So I'm gonna hit the absolute minimum to begin a sequence of meditations, and then we're gonna be working through these sequence of meditations week by week by week, following the sequence as described so many years ago. And then after establishing that basis, then we're going to jump back to the beginning and just really methodically work through. Because, a big chunk of the beginning of the text is just establishing a basis, but we should start meditating before we get through the basis. Uh, and then once we've really developed our muscles and developed our logical basis and understanding, then we're going to start playing a lot more intimately with the lion's dance. And then, of course, we're going to be doing these deep dive weekend experiences. The next one's going to be on June 21st and 22nd, where, we're just really we're gonna dig in deep and, give it a real honest shot. So today's goal was number one, to establish the big idea, a little bit of my story, and talk about the texts we'll be using and the differentiation of the texts, how we'll be using them. And now we're going to start with establishing the basis and doing the first meditation. So the basis that we need to establish is understanding the goal of meditation is to develop our consciousness to the highest peak of consciousness, which is omniscience. And omniscience is a really wild idea. It's super radical. It's way far out. And it's kind of hard to believe, uh, which is why we can use logic to help assist us in our analysis of, is it possible? Okay, and then we'll talk about why compassion is the root, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the entire path of meditation, and how that relates to omniscience, and then we'll do our first meditation. All right, so the way the text starts, I thought this was so cool. It's a text on meditation, and I really didn't know what to expect. But the stages of meditation starts with an a statement on cause and effect, which I was like, ah, beautiful. It is not possible for omniscience to be produced without causes and conditions. That is the beginning of the text. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. And by the way, there's 3 volumes, and we're starting with the second volume because that's the one that's really focused on meditation. So this is how the second volume starts of the stages of meditation. Okay, and then the whole rest of the path in typical Indian style is explained in total in the very beginning, and then the rest of the text is expanding on that initial whole statement. LJ, we studied the Yoga Sutra, and we know the whole Yoga Sutra is stated in the second verse, period. And then the whole rest of the text is just an expansion of that second verse.
I love that. It's so cool.
Me too. It's so efficient and it's extremely focusing. So try to catch this because if we never have another class together, here's the whole teaching. Okay. If you ask, what are the causes and conditions of the final fruit of omniscience? I, and this is Kamalashili speaking, who am like a blind man, may not be in a position to explain by myself, but I shall employ the Buddha's own words, just as he spoke them to his disciples after his enlightenment. He said, Vajrapani, Lord of Secrets, the transcendental wisdom of omniscience has its root in compassion and arises from a cause. So those are two really big statements already. Omniscience has its root in compassion and it arises from a cause. The altruistic thought, the awakening mind of bodhicitta, and the perfection of skillful means. Therefore, if you're interested in achieving omniscience, which, why not give it a shot? You need to practice these three: compassion, the awakening mind of bodhicitta, and skillful means. So those three things are what we're going to be, that's the whole subject of this. Really, really, really extraordinary. It's amazing that someone could say, oh, just these three things. You're like, okay, cool. Like, I know what to do. Um, so let's talk about the logical basis for that. But before that, we have to talk about why we care. Because if you are really willing to go begin on this journey, you need to know why. Because it's not easy. It's difficult. People drop off. um, it doesn't become a priority. It's a priority and it drops off. So it's really, really important to understand why we're doing the hard thing of developing a skill at all. Whether you're learning piano or you're learning something else, developing a skill is not easy. So we need to know why we're doing it to motivate ourselves when we fall off. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, those of us who desire happiness for others and ourselves temporarily and in the long term should be motivated to attain the omniscient state. So it's like, well, yeah, I want happiness and I want that for me and other people now and always. So, okay, you got my attention. The whole purpose of meditation is to lessen the diluted afflictions of our minds and eventually eradicate them from their very roots. Pretty cool. And then in the Yoga Sutra, it's really interesting. I'm jumping from the second verse of the first chapter to the first verse of the second chapter. Through the perfection of meditation, the seer comes to dwell within their true nature, and doing so makes suffering dwindle away. Beautiful. So that's pretty motivating to me. Making suffering dwindle away. Great. Happiness for me and everybody else. Awesome. I love that. Do I really care about omniscience? Primarily, no. Primarily, no. But to eradicate suffering for me and all beings, now you got my attention. You know what I mean? Because a suffering mind that is omniscient, well, you couldn't actually have that. But to try to think that there could be omniscience without that, that's just not very interesting. So we have to talk about consciousness because consciousness is the very basis upon which this conversation about omniscience is possible. And when we talk about meditation, we're just playing in the sandbox of consciousness. That's really what we're doing. So, what the heck is consciousness? Which is a really fun question that you find philosophers try to answer all the time, and you find scientists absolutely and utterly befuddled, which is wild because it's interesting. We'll study everything, at everything, at everything. We'll have all these kind of answers about it, but it's so difficult to talk about the one who is even perceiving these things that we're observing. And science has a huge challenge of describing consciousness. Luckily, we have a great tradition in Buddhism and yoga that says, "Oh, consciousness, I know what that is." Simply, consciousness is that thing which possesses the function of knowing. That's it. That's it. Which that makes sense. The qualities and function of consciousness is that it's aware and knowing. That is what consciousness is. That thing which is knowing, and its quality is awareness and luminosity. And that idea of luminosity, guys, I had a hard time really connecting with that. I would say it no other way. Now that I've spent a lot of time trying to directly experience what that means, it is wildly perfect. So, I just wanted to share that with you. So, if consciousness is this basis, then we have to ask the question, to what degree is consciousness developable? We have at one end of the continuum saying, oh, we're woefully unaware. Like, I look at my baby, you know, and she has no idea that playing with that thing is going to hurt her. Like, she's like, "Oh, Dad, you're using a utility knife. Can I have that?" I'm like, "No, absolutely not." She is so unaware. Her consciousness, though quite luminous, is not very developed in the sense of knowing and understanding. It's like, oh man, I wasn't aware of that. Like the goal, as you become more conscious, you're more aware of more things. Um, and so if you take up your trade, when you think about when you first take up your trade or your profession, you were really unaware of how a business works or how, that skill works. And then you developed over time with your ability to perceive that nuance or understand what's going on. Um, a- and that's development of your consciousness. And so if you were to develop that, to what degree is that developable? There is no limit to that, technically. Like, what is the limit of awareness? I'm not saying what's the limit of your awareness. I'm just saying what is the limit of awareness? There is no limit to awareness. And so that state to describe that totally aware state is omniscience. So the logically, if someone can increase their consciousness 1 degree, then logically you can go all the way. And that state is called omniscience. How do we do that? We do that by training. It's just that simple. That's why we do this all the time in everything that we do. We gain an education to become more perceptive and aware and understanding of the thing that we're trying to do. And by becoming more perceptive, aware, and understanding, we do so to become happier because we'll be more successful at the things that we're undertaking. And so we can be very specific to one skill or craft, but then we can also apply that same framework to consciousness as a whole. And that is the art of meditation. That is the training of meditation. So, what is the definition of omniscience? Because omniscience is the whole basis of, what we're talking about here. Omniscience is peak or perfected consciousness. It's the ability to know each and everything without being obstructed by differences of time and space. That's a big idea. Cook on it. Not only becoming aware and understanding of the objects of reality, but taking the reality as the object itself. So understanding like the nature of, this glass. Can I become fully aware of this glass, not obstructed by time and space? So I saw where it came from. I know where it's going. I know every single thing about this glass of water. Omniscience is then also understanding the nature of the reality upon which I have the ability to perceive the glass of water. So not only the object itself, but the reality upon which the object can appear and be observed, which is pretty radical. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Cool.
Doing good.
So the next thing Kamala Shila says is to achieve this state of omniscience, we must understand that it is a produced thing. And that is a huge, huge, huge statement. And it's one of the is that one statement is a gigantic differentiation between the different schools of Eastern philosophy. Is omniscience a caused thing? Like, is there a cause for omniscience? Or is omniscience an eternal uncaused thing, unproduced? Omniscience could not arise. If you would say that omniscience is a thing that arises, if we can say I wasn't omniscient and now I am, That's the definition of something being produced. That is a result because it changed. It arose. And so anything that is produced must be produced by something. There's no such thing as a produced thing that is unproduced. Or there's no such thing as a result without a cause. And so what is the cause and condition of omniscience? The other thing is that omniscience is a perception. And what you're omniscient of is changing. And so a perception, which is perceiving change, is itself changing because the subject and object are indivisibly connected. So if the object changes, then the mind which is perceiving that object is changing also because it's perceiving a changing thing. So its perception is changing. And so that must have a cause. It can't be unproduced. Otherwise, it couldn't change. So if there wasn't a cause, then all consciousness would be omniscient because that would be the steady state, unchanging, unproduced. And every single consciousness would abide in that uncaused, unchanging, unproduced, eternal state. And I am not omniscient. So there it is. We have all kinds of proofs that omniscience has a cause. Now, I'm not asking you whether you believe you can become omniscient. What we're doing here is establishing that what, number one, what is omniscience? And number two, is there a cause for omniscience? Okay. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it logical to think that consciousness can be developed theoretically into omniscience?
I think so. I mean, I feel like intuitively, like on like a intuitive level, I've always kind of felt that way. And then kind of logically parsing it apart. I think to me it seems like the logic unfolds in a way that makes sense.
What do you think, Sophie? Maybe you can't talk. Not sure.
At the same time, it is like a like a very like
Yeah, it is.
wild extreme concept. So it's kind of it has that kind of like duality component for me. But
Hi.
Hey,
Hi
Sophie.
guys. Yeah. So for me, I think I understand, but at the same time, not 100% sure because a lot of terms is like new to me and it sounds a little uh, unknown. So
Yeah,
I
good.
feel like, yeah, it does make sense. And I want to ask, is it possible to explain in a simpler way of like you did with the water in glass?
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know how you can do it.
Oh, explain omniscience?
Yeah, like cautiousness. So it's basically understanding why we're doing it, right?
Yeah, so we can understand consciousness in a very, very easy example of waking up. When you're asleep, you're unconscious, right?
Right.
Or if you've ever lost consciousness, right? So, like,
Mm.
I played football like while I was in school, and I got hit so hard that I got knocked out. I lost consciousness. So let's take the definition of consciousness. Is there
That's a good
anything
one.
that
Yeah.
is there anything I could know? Like, was I in a state of knowing? Meaning like I'm seeing a thing and I'm knowing that like my hand is in front of me. I know that. Or I know that there's some grass underneath my feet. Like in a
Right.
state of unconsciousness, I don't know anything.
Right.
And then when I become conscious again, my knowing comes back.
Got
And
it.
so and you can think of it, this is not very directly what it means when we say luminosity, but we can think of there are no images when we're unconscious. Images
Mm-hmm.
meaning sounds, smells, sight. Images meaning data. There's no data that is being apprehended. There's no data that's like you took a flashlight and you shined it on it and now you can see it because I'm unconscious. So there's no luminosity. There's no ability to perceive.
Right.
Like in the darkness, you can't see anything because there's no light to bounce the information back at your eyeball.
Right.
Like you have a flashlight and then the light bounces off of the object into your eyeball and now you perceive it. That's in a way luminosity. And so if I don't have luminosity, then I can't know anything because there's nothing to know. And so there's no capacity to know it. And so we can think of when we wake up, you know, when we're in a dream, that is a level of consciousness. You can't say that you're unconscious when you're in a dream.
Right.
But there's a state in sleeping when you're in sleepless, or sorry, dreamless sleep, and that's a state of unconsciousness in a way. So you can use those to understand what consciousness is, and then think about how even from the first moments that you become conscious when you wake up, you're like, whoa, what is that sound? And so it's like a very low level of consciousness, as you're just like, I don't really understand what I'm perceiving. I can't even really perceive that well right now. Like my eyes are blurry, like the sounds feel strange. And then within 4 seconds, 5 seconds, oh, that's a bird. Oh, bird. Oh, it's a robin. I know the song of the robin. So all of a sudden our consciousness is maturing and developing very rapidly as we're going from unconscious to conscious, as we're going from extremely unaware. Okay, boom, we're conscious and we're hardly aware of what's going on. Like we hardly understand what's going on. And then we become more and more able to understand and be aware of what's happening in our world. How is that?
Yeah, and it's a good example. But I also was always thinking that like I'm conscious, right? So I feel like I'm aware of what's happening, right? That I'm awake. And then
Mhm.
obviously the more I dig into the yoga, I realized that I wasn't. So for me, it was more
Yeah.
about the knowledge. The more you study, the more you become aware of become like you wake up in a different way.
Yeah.
So I always related to the knowledge of it,
Yeah.
where we before know it and we didn't know it. So it's like a different reality when you know things and then things start open up after you start like study and look at it from a different perspective.
Which in this graph is symbolized with the idea of training.
Ah, okay.
So consciousness, in one way, is either yes or no. Am I conscious or am I not conscious? And the moment you say, yes, I'm conscious, now you have the ability to train that consciousness to gain knowledge and to gain awareness of the things that were already there.
Right. Okay, yeah, thank you. It kind of a little more clear.
So then if we were to say very specifically our yoga as an example, like in Warrior 2 or any of the warriors, where your knee is really important. And I'm not even talking forward or back. I'm talking in or out, right? You want the thigh bone to be externally rotated so your knee isn't dipping in. You want it to be upright. I didn't know that when I first started, you know. And so and so at first it was very gross, meaning it was very obvious. It was like, "Oh, I just have to do it at all." So okay, so let me just bring it up, you know? And then after that, I was like, oh, I'm actually going too far now. So now I have an even more fine understanding, very detailed understanding of, okay, it's actually not that simple. There's a little more information there. And then
Mhm.
increasingly more and more subtle. And then you realize that the only way you could put your knee in the right position is actually because of your foot position. So now your awareness is expanding from this one thing all the way to
Oh,
the arch of your foot. Sorry?
oh, sorry. It is somebody walking. I took to that first.
Yeah, good. Um, so then, Sophie, you like in yoga, because I know you're an asana instructor. Um, are you aware of how the arch of your foot affects your knee?
Yes.
Right. So then what affects the arch? The toes. What affects the toes? And then all of a sudden you become more and more and more aware of how all these different things come together into one experience. So, where is the end of that awareness? Like, when would you stop learning and becoming more aware of new knowledge about how to do that thing better?
When you stop learning, I don't know.
Yeah. So,
Never.
like, right. Well, until every single thing was known. Because if you think about it, the thigh bone, the femur, is connected to the knee is connected to the tibia is connected to the foot is on a mat, the mat is on the floor is part of a building, the building is in part of a state, which is in part of a country, which is part of a Earth, which is part of a galaxy, so like, is it useful to understand the sun as it relates to your knee? For most people, no. But if you wanted to imagine having the most complete understanding, then you would have to become aware of how even the subtle gravity interactions of the planets are affecting. Now, is that
Right.
useful or not? That's a wholly different conversation. But what we're saying is that if we continue to expand our concept of what it means to know a thing, we'll find that there is no end of it until it's knowing all things,
Mm,
which comes from education and training and knowledge.
right.
And so that state of Sophie learning about going from the most obvious thing of the knee shouldn't be dipping in to the most expansive thing, uh, that state of complete and total expansion is omniscience.
Mhm.
How's that? Does that help?
Yes.
Great question. Thank
Omniscience.
you.
So the
Yeah.
omniscience is actually meaning to know, like the expanded way of it, or it just like give it away.
Extended. Tell me what you mean.
What the word omniscient exactly mean?
So omniscience is when consciousness is at its maximum level of development, meaning it has the ability to know every single thing without obstacles, including time and space.
Mhm. So it's not achievable for us, but we can just try.
Well,
Assume we are the gods.
yeah, so what's interesting is that what Kamala Shila is saying here is that omniscience has a cause. And so if we could only create the cause for omniscience, then we would get the result of omniscience. You do need to evolve in order to be omniscient. It's the peak of evolution of the mind. Whether you can or can't, I'm going to let you decide that. I'm not going to tell you whether you, Sophie, can or can't. I don't have that capacity to decide that. Um, it's up to our ability to train ourselves. But when we go into the endeavor of meditation, it's important to understand the limits. Like, what are the limits? Like, when I go to play piano, I'm inspired by the world's best pianists ever. The masters, the people who've perfected piano. Does that mean that I'll become one of them? I don't know, man. But it's a great inspiration, right? It keeps me
Yes,
going because they give such joy to people who listen. And so
right.
it's cool to think about what is the possibility. And then I'm gonna do the things that they did, the piano players. I'm gonna try to do the causes that they did. Will I be as disciplined? I don't know. Will I have the same commitment? I don't know. But like the way that you develop anything is pretty similar. Like if we want to get to the essentials, specifically for me, exactly could be different. But at the end of the day, I gotta learn how to move my fingers, to play
Right.
piano. Like everybody shares that in the path of learning to play piano. Everybody learns breathing when they want to learn yoga asana. And so that's a apparent cause for us to develop our practice. So even if I'm not going to become Sri Patabi Joyce, even if I'm not going to become Krishnamacharya or Iyengar or, any of these great asana, I'm actually going to be doing kind of the similar things that they did at some point, probably very, very early on. I'm going to be trying to accomplish similar things. So we can think of that in this way.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's a little more clear.
Yeah, beautiful. I
Yeah,
really appreciate you asking.
yeah, because like I have a little barrier with understanding certain words. It sounds everything really good in a way have it, but sometimes it's hard for me to understand the meaning behind it. So thank you so much for explaining it
Yeah,
in the most simpler way.
no, I really appreciate that. Please continue to ask me. Um, and so why do we want omniscience? Why would it be valuable to know all things? Because at the end of the day, the whole purpose of our practice, in the way that you're going to hear it as spiritual warrior, the way that you're going to hear it here, the only reason we do literally anything is to serve other people. So if I really knew what you needed, because I knew all things, then I could really help you. Right? So even
Mhm.
if I think I can be omniscient or not, it is not necessarily relevant to have this motivation. And this motivation is actually the cause for omniscience anyway. To desire omniscience without this motivation would block you from being able to actually realize omniscience. And we're going to see why in a moment. And you don't have to
Mhm.
believe me, but I'm going to share with you what the authors say. And at least in my
Right.
reality, like the way that I first really started connecting with this was, um, how could I actually help you if I didn't love you? Like when I say love, when I think about the person that I love, I'm trying to see them in total. Because that's what it means to love somebody. It's like I see you and I want to see as much of you as I possibly can. The good, the bad, the ugly. Like the people who love me, they see me in ways that I can't see myself sometimes. And because of their love, they're able to concentrate on me. They're not distracted by the TV. They're not distracted. They're looking at me with their whole heart. And then they're like, I think this might actually help you. And then they give me something. I'm like, oh my God, that was so helpful. Thank you. How did you know I needed that? They're like, because I love you. And so love is this incredible, like, space or attitude or context upon which, because of our love for that person, we're learning more about them. And out of that movement of pure love, we don't have selfishness to block our capacity to serve them. Because we can want to help somebody, but then we're like, yeah, but how's it going to help me? And then all of a sudden it's weird now and it won't actually help them. It couldn't. It might help them a little bit, but if I just was totally committed to serving you with my whole being, then I could actually give you something that might actually help. But if I have this motivation of me, 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 and then I give you something out of that motivation, then I'm not actually helping you because I'm now creating an obstacle to my capacity to know what would actually help you. And you see
Mhm.
this in relationships. If you want a relationship with a
Yeah.
romantic partner or a business partner and you're totally focused on you, then that relationship will become destroyed. That is the cause of the destruction of relationship because you're
Right.
not actually knowing what's going to get you to your goal. Because what's going to get you to your goal is a good relationship. And so how could you have
Right.
a good relationship if all you thought about was you?
So that's why I have a question. So you don't really need to know to learn how to like to serve other people. You can actually serve other people without knowing, right?
Hold that thought. We're gonna get there. Remember your question
Because
because I'm gonna
yeah,
bring
because
it.
I felt that way it usually start from that way, it's like good to serve others without knowing. And then when you start serving, it's open up another thing, and then you dive
Yeah.
deep into it.
Yeah. You are correct. But there's another level there's even more that we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm gonna read the next parts and then I'm gonna actually answer your question. Um, this is the next part of the root text. Moved by compassion. That's enough of a teaching, by the way. Moved by compassion. We can close the book now. You know what I mean? Like, okay, the teaching's done. But this is what Kamalashila says next. After he says, it's possible to it's possible to produce omniscience because omniscience is something that's produced. Cool. The next thing he says is moved by compassion, bodhisattvas take the vow to liberate all sentient beings. Ah, that just sings in my heart, man. Like that is just like, mm, that's so much the whole thing. We take a vow to liberate all sentient beings as a movement of our compassion. So now that we know the context, let's drop into a little more of the technical. Okay, because this is what is going to now get into Sophie's question. Um, because that's what Sophie just said. Like, isn't it beautiful just to move with compassion? And isn't that the very beginning of so much? And the answer is absolutely yes, without a doubt. But we should talk about it a little more because it can get even cooler. So, having entered into and mastered the practice of serving others, and then Sophie, here's the second part, and gaining insight in order to serve others, we'll talk about it a little bit more. They, the bodhisattvas, have omniscience itself in the palm of their hand. I'm going to read that again. Having entered into and mastered the practice of serving others and gaining insight in order to serve others, they have omniscience itself in the palm of their hand. Therefore, since compassion is the only root of omniscience, you should become familiar with this practice from the very beginning. So let's talk about it a little bit more, because that's the root text. So now let's talk about it. Compassion is the root. It's the beginning, the middle, and the end of the entire path, which means those beings who are omniscient, guess how they're spending their time? Serving. So not only is it the beginning, it's the end. Because an omniscient being would be constantly in the bliss of the highest thing. And the highest thing is serving others. Like that's the reason we become better people, is to create happiness in the world. Because there's nothing more blissful than that. And that's what an omniscient being is. They're stuck in a state of bliss. So the cause of omniscience comes from serving others. The emotional experience of omniscience. So, omniscience is kind of like this very cold thing. It's like a logical thing. It's like, how much data can you access? But let's talk about the emotional experience of omniscience. The feeling of omniscience is total bliss, it's free of all suffering. Because the things that block us from omniscience are the very same things which cause suffering. The very things that block us from omniscience are the very things that cause suffering, which means to stop all suffering would be the cause of omniscience. And then in the state of omniscience, we would no longer have the causes of suffering, which means that we would embody our true nature, which is total bliss. So helping others be relieved of suffering is the cause of the end of suffering, which, by the way, is omniscience. So we can see how these things are related. Because if you knew every single effect of every single cause because you're omniscient, and you perfectly understand by doing this, I will get a good result, and by doing this, I will get a bad result. Like an omniscient being wouldn't do wrong things. It wouldn't like go and make an investment in something, being like, I hope it works. An omniscient being would know it would work or something like that. Or by giving somebody chocolate, it would really make them happy. Instead of, oh my God, I didn't know they were allergic to chocolate and now they're like suffering in allergies. Like an omniscient being could not do that. So we see how omniscience and suffering are related. And so if we wanted to understand the end of suffering, which is the beginning of omniscience, then we would understand that relieving others of suffering is the cause of the end of our own suffering, which is the cause of omniscience. That was a lot. Unpack it, think about it. Um,
Yeah, it definitely a lot. It's like need to a slow motion play of thinking.
yeah. Yeah, and this is why we meditate. We hear some things, and then we go into the stilled quiet of a meditative state to check it out. So therefore, compassion is not the absence of logical action. A lot of people are like, "Oh, when you're nice to other people, then, you're open to be hurt or something like that." Or it's not logical to be compassionate. Those people don't understand. If they understood that stopping the suffering of others is the cause of the stoppage of our own suffering, and the state of no suffering is a state of bliss, which is the experience of omniscience, then we would understand that compassion is the epitome, is the highest form of logical action. Because I don't want to suffer. So, like, why would I create suffering? So, therefore, let me be compassion. Because, like you said, by serving others, you open up wisdom in your being. So, how do we do that? What is the actual embodiment of this compassionate way of being, which is the epitome of logic? It's the six perfections, and we'll get into that at some point, but I just wanted to let you know that there's a lot of different frameworks. Um, to me, one of the most functional is called the six perfections. Um,
Yes.
what, Sophie?
Also, I have a question. So by knowing, right, serving others, you're gonna like achieve something. Isn't it in a way acting on your own benefit?
Yeah, but in an
Mm.
extremely wise way. Like, you're like, oh, I want to become stronger so I can help that old lady across the road, um, like move her stuff, because like that's a good reason to get strong, And so you're like, well, how do I get strong? And it's like, well, I should help other people get strong. And it's like, is that a selfish thing? Like to help someone else be strong so that I can be strong so that I can help the lady across the street? The reason that
Right.
we become better is so that we can serve. And the way that we serve, sorry, the reason we become better is so that we can serve. And so we serve in order to get better.
Right. That's so
And
good. I
s-
need to write it down.
and so it's called enlighten,
Mm.
like the term that we like to say, which is really fun, is it is self-interest for sure, but it's enlightened self-interest because it is for the sake of all beings. If it's just for me, 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 then it's broken. If it's for me, for everyone, and for me and for everyone is the same thing, that's when you enter into the mind of a Buddha. That's when you enter into the mind of a Bodhisattva. That's when you enter into the mind of an enlightened self-interest. Is like, why should I have things so that I can serve other people? So let me help other people get money so that I can get money so that I can serve other people. Because it's hard to serve people when you don't have resources. It's just difficult. You can't even
Mhm.
focus on your practice because you are struggling to pay rent. And so let
Right.
me go help other people pay rent so that I can pay rent, so that I can just focus with a calm mind on my practice, so that I can become a better, kinder person for the sake of all beings. And
Mhm.
that's this upward spiral, Sophie, is understanding, then embodying compassion. So if you become aware that it's awesome to serve other people, then you actually plant the causes for increased awareness, which is to some degree omniscience, because omniscience is just total awareness. And so, but we take baby steps to get there, right? Whether we get there or not is a different story, but it's the same path. Like it's we're on the same road. How far we get along the road, that's up to you. I can't tell you that. And so awareness, knowing what someone needs in order to serve them, is a function of conscious awareness. And so in order to become aware, the what the texts say and what I experience in my own personal journey is that to become aware, I require compassion. Because how do I know how to serve you if I'm not paying attention to you? Paying attention to you is an act of compassion. So awareness is required for compassion, and compassion creates awareness. And then that new awareness, so let's look at this little upward spiral here. So, I need some awareness. Oh, great. Now I know how to serve somebody. I have compassion. Because I served you, whoop, now I have more awareness. And because I have more awareness, whoop, I can serve you even better. And because I have even better, and then you just, it's a positive feedback loop going up. And so this is why compassion is the root of the practice, because it's the starting motivation. It's why it's the beginning of the practice, because when we start to do it, it increases our causes for greater awareness, so that when we go into meditation, we gain beautiful insight, we see transformation in our heart, and then we go out into the world, and now we're in the middle, great. Now I'm acting with compassion. I'm actually doing it. And then the end of the path is I've I've done the whole thing. I'm omniscient. I'm a Buddha. And what am I doing? I'm serving others perfectly. And that's how it's the root, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the path. All right. I would like to end with a meditation, and I would like to end on time to respect everybody's time. So, how do we start? And this is the first meditation that we're going to do, and I am going to fit it in the time that we have. Okay, and then I am available for some questions. If you're available, if you want to hang out a little bit after class, I can take some questions. So how do we start? We talked about really giant ideas. Every class will not be this challenging. Maybe it will. I don't know. Um, how do we start? We talked about these big things, but what's step one? We have to start with equanimity. So the definition of compassion, because equanimity is how we develop compassion. Compassion is a mind that focuses on the beings that are miserable and wishes them to be free of suffering. That's compassion. I want to stop suffering and all the causes of suffering now and forever for everybody. That's a very high compassionate mind. I really wish that my mom doesn't get sick. And when she's sick, I freaking hate it. I don't want that. When my when I get sick, I don't want that. I'm suffering. I want to stop that. When people get a prize, get money, and they thought that that would make them happy and they're not, and they're still suffering, I I would work my whole life so they wouldn't have to suffer that way. Because that's a very profound, deep, sad suffering. Is to work your whole life for something thinking it would make you happy to then only get it and realize that it could never, it didn't bring you happiness. Like that is compassion. There's misery in this world, and I wish everybody to be free of that misery. So then equanimity is how we develop compassion. And equanimity is impartiality, meaning when I'm working on this idea of reducing suffering in the world, I am equally working for others as I am working for myself. So, like, your happiness is as important to me as my own happiness. Your dreams in life are as important to me as my own dreams for my life. Like, there's no difference. I get a free day. I get a free day and I can spend it however I like. I'm equally considering your happiness and my happiness. It's like, oh, I have all of my projects. And it's like, yeah, but what about my friends' projects? What about my partner's projects? Like, what if I spent my time working on those projects and my projects? And in fact, helping other people achieve their projects is exactly how you see yourself achieve your projects, because there's no such thing as an effect without a cause. So, equanimity is that mind that is equally holding other people's suffering and my own suffering as being equally important to me to relieve. So if my neighbor is hungry and I'm hungry, I feed us both. Okay. And so the idea is to be blind like the sun. The sun doesn't care who is in front of it. It shines its light. It has equanimity. It doesn't prefer Earth over Mars. So with your love, it's without preference. Your love is equally pure and powerful, regardless of the person in front of you, whether that's you or somebody else, or the person you like or the person you don't like. You work equally for their happiness with no difference between the two. So that's equanimity. So, how do we develop that? We're going to do a little meditation here. This is the whole meditation. I'm going to share these slides with you afterward. I'm also going to probably stay after and do like a nice full meditation recorded. Um, but and then on Monday mornings, by the way, Monday mornings, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., I'm going to be teaching like how to meditate. So here we'll be going through which meditations to do, but I won't be teaching very much how to meditate. So on Mondays, I'll be teaching the method of meditation very focusedly. We'll get into that later in the text, but so let's do a little meditation right now. I'm going to skip a lot of this and just hone in on the very specific thing. So the name of this meditation is cultivating loving kindness toward those in misery. So you can just in a short term, you can just say loving kindness meditation. Okay? So wherever you are, let's come to stillness. Okay, if you're in your chair, it doesn't matter. If you're standing up, doesn't matter. If you're walking, doesn't matter. So come to stillness, and decide to either close your eyes or not. It does not matter. The purpose of meditation is concentration. We are going to do this in 5 minutes. So normally we would take 5 minutes to even approach our meditation, but we're just going to do 5 minutes. So root down in the sensation of your breath. The only time and place to feel your breath is here and now. So anchor yourself present in the present moment. Drop into a state of vibrant relaxation. Now we're going to think about somebody that we perceive as suffering. And in your mind's eye, begin to label the quality of their suffering. Are they sad? Are they sick? Are they confused? Are they lost? Like, what is the quality of their suffering? And now let your heart break. Let your heart break. And as your heart breaks, desperately, desperately wish that they didn't have to suffer in that way. And now consider how many people in this entire universe who suffer similarly. It's a heavy thought. Let it be heavy. And now wish that you could take away all of that suffering and all of the causes of that suffering. And now imagine just that wish jumping from your heart to their heart and destroying the suffering. And feel the relaxation that comes from even imagining a world where that quality of suffering has been eradicated, destroyed. And the way we'll finish the meditation is with a commitment. Say, I promise to do my practice for you. I want to help, and I'll do my best to help. And imagine that commitment echoing through your consciousness like a lion's roar. Scaring away all of your selfishness and all the things that block you from fulfilling your commitment to serve others. Roar. Bye. Okay, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes and exit your meditation. Oh. All right, that's
Thanks,
class.
Bob.
Mhm.
Thank
So,
you.
last thing, your homework, if you would like it, is to do that meditation all week. Do it once a day. We just did it in 7 minutes. We didn't do five. Sorry. She can just do that 5 minutes a day between now and next week. Kamala Sheila says that this is the very beginning of the path. So it might be smart to try. Maybe. You decide. See how but seriously, you will see how things start to change in your world. I guarantee it if you do that meditation earnestly, like in your with your heart. Even within a week, you can start to see changes. So that's your homework if you would like it. All right. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bob.
Bob.
Yeah. Feel free to hang out if you want to ask any questions or clarifications or anything like that.
I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna move out of this. I'm gonna try to start putting a dent in this this apartment that I'm trying to move out of in like 2 hours. So
Yeah, good luck. Everything
A
will
lot
work
of
out. Don't worry.
yeah, no, I trust that. Thanks for the grounding presence this morning, Bob. You're the man.
All right, man. Love you, homie.
All right,
I'll
love
see
you,
ya.
bro. Peace out.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.